I thought I was prepared and I wasn't.
Bones, leave this in.
Okay, well, welcome back, everybody, to another episode of part 5 of 4. Oh, god damn it. Redo. Okay, welcome back, everybody, to another episode of part 5 of 4, a BL podcast, where we are talking everything BL, Danmei, the whole works. If you have an unpopular opinion about BL, don't worry, we probably do too. Saying everything you do or don't want to hear, we are here to engage with BL media from Japan, Thailand, China, Korea, and any other places that might pique our interest. We're talking filmmaking techniques, narrative analysis, fandom woes, while asking questions about yo, has anybody noticed that the bottoms don't move their arms? We may not be experts, but we are loud, chaotic, and we are full of opinions. And today, we are getting spicy once more. Unlike this show, which is very vanilla. Senna, you want to tell folks what we're talking about today?
Hell yeah. Okay, so today we are starting what I think we're hoping will be a series, which is talking about some of the big hits of BL, the stuff that is on every single rec list that 95% of people, if you ask them, what should I be watching? It will be stuff that people will tell you to watch. And we're starting this off with Until We Meet Again. So for those of you who have not heard of Until We Meet Again, so Until We Meet Again is from 2019. So for kind of modern BL, it's a little bit on the older side. And it is about these two guys in college who are reincarnations of two other guys who died in love and tragically. And it's about them figuring out why they feel so connected to each other, and family drama and the red string of fate, and a lot of things that on the surface are extremely interesting.
So we are here to ask the question, is Until We Meet Again overhyped or not?
Yes, that's something I should have added, since that's how we've been talking about this series. Thank you for the save there.
So I guess for folks, just to get it out of the way, because I hate to be one of those clickbait YouTubers that puts the crazy overdramatic screen caps and stuff and then never gets to the point until the last 2 seconds of the video. Do we think Until We Meet Again is overhyped? Our base opinion.
Okay, this is the least helpful answer ever, but maybe.
And we'll go into our reasons why, but off the bat, I'm leaning towards yes for reasons.
Right, okay, so I agree. I would say an overall yes, with the asterisk that within the show, there is one way too long, kind of mid-okay college BL, one fantastic, absolutely gorgeous, historical BL, and then just for flavor, there's a third side BL that is a sports BL, where those two guys will never find out that they're actually in a reincarnation show. It's kind of like if someone
made a 3-flavored cake, but only 2 of the flavors moderately go together, and then the other flavor was just put in as a dare.
Yeah, for the last flavor, someone grabbed the wrong, they thought they grabbed the vanilla, and it was actually, chili spice or something. So you bite into it, and you're like, oh, that's an interesting flavor for a cake.
That would be me.
I don't know that I love it. I don't know that I 17 episodes worth of love
That would be me, because I can't bake for worth nothing. So I guess to start off, we should talk about
okay,
the reasons why, kind of point by point, of why we think it's kind of overhyped. What are the specifics, I guess, to get into? And I guess the easiest would be, because I feel like the story is a lot of meat and a lot of what people kind of already discuss. But I really want to discuss the filmmaking and the acting, because I don't feel like I see a lot of that kind of discussion in fandom. And those are 2 of the biggest points for me in regards to this show in particular.
Yes, I agree. So kind of as I said earlier, I feel like the thing that gets me about this show every time I think about it, or I'm or when clips pop up on YouTube about it, is that in some ways I think the biggest problem it has is that it is actually 3 different shows that are braided together with varying degrees of success.
I would agree with that, though. I would agree with that, because we have I guess if we were start at the beginning, the first episode opens pretty strongly, Yeah,
it is a bold
and it opens
bold
with
first scene.
Our historical storyline, our historical plot thread with Korn and In, who are played by Kuhar and Cal, I believe. Senna, do you want to kind of go into what our historical like storyline for the show is, starring Corrin in?
Yeah, absolutely. So our historical storyline, I believe, is set in like the late '80s, and it follows. On one hand, we have In, who is played by Kuhart, and the other guy is Korn, who is played by Cow. And they are attending the same university. And literally one day, Cow is sitting there reading moodily in a hallway, and Kuhart walks past him, and like In's face turns and he's like, that one. That's the one I want. And he immediately walks up to this man and he's like, hey, hi, I'm In. I'm going to start flirting with you. You're chill with that, right? And Korn is like, you're insane. And In's like, that's fair. But also, like, we're meant for each other. I think you're beautiful. Let's have babies.
It's truly only a slight exaggeration.
This is the thing I love. Like, this reason In is my favorite character in the whole show is because he has the strongest, like, that's my man. Like, he saw a man and he decided he wanted that man, and then he pursued that man.
He claimed that man harder than Charlie claims Babe in Pit Babe. I'm just saying. Like,
yeah. It's true. It's true. So kind of the overall arc of their romance is that they start hanging out, they start dating, they fall in love. Kind of in some ways a very like typical romance arc, especially for a BL. But unfortunately, there are some really intense complications. They're living several decades in the past where queer acceptance is not even kind of where to the point where it is today. On top of that, Korn is part of a crime family, and he is expected to take over the business once he's grown up. He has a dad who is not like hyped about him dating a dude. And I think, in fact, there's a moment where he's like, okay, if you don't break up with this guy, and like the implication is I'm going to send someone to like kill him. So that being said, they kind of persevere and they were like, you know what? Fuck it. We're in love and that we are meant for each other and ain't nobody going to stop us now, baby. So you find out more about their families. Like they both have siblings that they're close to. So they're in this kind of weird place of like their siblings are like, we get it. Some people are just gay. It's fine. But they both have dad situations that are really, really not into it. And then unfortunately, it all comes to this final confrontation in the apartment that they have procured to move in together and live in together between them and their dads. And it ends with Korn taking his own life and then in devastated having seen this, doing the same. So it is an extremely tragic end to an extremely well done, both on like a story level and on an acting level, love story. So that is kind of our first thread going through this show.
And that's how the show starts. It doesn't start with all of that because that'd be a lot.
No.
So then we have our present day reincarnated lovers storyline, which is with Dean and Parm. So do you want to give a quick rundown of our reincarnated boys?
Yes. So Dean and Parm are two dudes who are going to the same university. Dean is a little bit older. Parm is a freshman. Dean is captain of the swimming team. And Parm likes to make desserts. These are, you would think those would just be like little notes in their characters, but no, it comprises 80% of Dean's character is that he swims, and I think half of the time Parm is on screen, he's making Thai desserts.
I wish
so many
that was
Thai
an
desserts.
It's
so many fucking Thai desserts. But they are immediately very drawn to each other, and they don't know why. And you kind of find out over time that both of them have always lived with this feeling that they were looking for someone. That there was just like this missing piece of their life that just they could never figure out what it was. And then they meet each other and it's like light bulb moment. Oh, there it is. There's my missing piece. And kind of as our story goes along, they both start remembering more and more of these past lives. So Parm is a reincarnation of In, and Dean is a reincarnation of Korn. And for Parm at least, and this kind of hints at one of the problems I have with their story, Parm is like really affected by these memories that he has. Like he's shown having like a very PTSD reaction to like loud bangs that sound like gunshots, like that debilitate him. He has like really intense dreams. So yeah, so a lot of the hard thing almost about describing their story is that it's so passive because so much of them is just kind of like going to college and waiting for the next like drop of memories to arrive so they can react to them.
Yeah, like there's some other stuff with them where I feel like if you've watched any 2019 BL, you kind of already know what, because they follow all the same romantic beats. You know, they flirt, sort of. There was attempts. And you know they're attracted. They start talking. They hit all the milestones. You know.
Yeah, they have their like obligatory like beach moment, except for it's on a floating raft. Which, as a side note, sounds very cool, and I would also like to go hang out on the floating rafts. Like that part's great. You know, eventually, like they do sleep together, and then for my money, the most interesting thing that happens kind of throughout this arc is that they come to realize that they are part of each other's families, in the sense that In is Dean's great uncle. Yeah, so In is Dean's great uncle, and Korn, I think, is also would have been Parm's great uncle.
I think it was regular uncle, but like, you know, no one cop us for that. But either way, it's an uncle-esque situation.
Yeah, so the moral of the story is they find out that they are that they are still within the same two families, except for they've like swapped sides. And they find out more and more, and the memories start coming faster and faster, and eventually kind of the climax of their story is that Parm gets like so overwhelmed with memories of In that he kind of loses himself, and he ends up back at that same apartment which the families have held on to after the death of Korn and In. They haven't changed anything, they haven't touched it, and he ends up back at that apartment with, I think it's the same gun actually, because he finds it in like his grandpa's office, kind of acting as a conduit for all of like In's anger about the fact that Korn left him. Like, he broke all these promises that they would be together and they would take care of each other, and he killed himself right in front of In, and he very much had promised not to do that. And of course it all comes out fine in the end. Parm does not shoot anyone. Everyone lives. There's like apologies between families, and there's forgiveness, and you know, you find out that like the dads who kind of instigated all this felt really bad about it, and they get to meet like their former siblings and have all of those connections, and it kind of ends on this very, you know, like, now that it kind of ends on the note of like In and Korn have finished up their story. So like all of that unfinished emotion and anger and like horror and sadness has finally like been put to bed. Now they can move on, and Parm and Dean can just live their lives without kind of carrying this past version of themselves.
Which sounds like it should be a good end to the story, but is somehow not. Because we still have to get the obligatory breakup for like an episode.
Oh, for 5 seconds. Which, what kills me is I actually think like the seed of the breakup is really interesting, of Parm being like, listen, I don't feel like we know who we are just to each other. Like, every moment we've been together has been like through the lens of In and Korn, and I think we should like take a break and take a breath and like figure out who we are as people. And I'm like, oh, that's great. And then they're like, you know, 10 minutes later, and now we're back together. I'm like, oh, okay, well,
I feel the same way, honestly. And we could talk more story later, but yeah, for me it's like the source of that breakup makes sense, but the execution of said breakup is really weak, because we've kind of already had the emotional climax of the story by that point. So this feels really limp, and it just feels like it
does.
Feels like you're still dragging me along, and I'm like, I'm done. We're done. We're over. You need to let me leave. It's like that friend that you invite over to your house for like a party, and they don't go home. You know, and you're like, look, it's like 1 a.m. You need to leave. And they're like telling 6 more stories, and you're like,
yeah,
you need to go. Like,
you gotta go. Like, you gotta get out, man. Like, I can't do this anymore. And then finally, our third kind of thread is Dean and Parm's best friends separately. When in team, they fall for each other, and I don't even think they start dating technically within like the context of Until We Meet Again. They have their own spin-off called Between Us that is mostly about them, because so many people watch the show, And we're like, yeah, sure, Dean and Parm, but also, what about this, like, swimming BL that's happening on the sidelines here with, like, one very lanky blonde guy with so many very embarrassing tattoos to have at the age of 22, like the wings, I can't deal with it, and, like, one very pretty but sad and closed off twink, and shockingly a lot of people are like, them, I'd like to know more about them and the swimming that they do. So that's your third thread. If you want to know about them, you should just watch Between Us.
You've watched Between Us. I have not. So I can't speak to its quality or lack of at all. You could speak to that and, like, the overall plot and such. Like, their story in Until We Meet Again is very much like they're besties to Dean and Parm, and they're also, like, in a friends with benefits type of situation, but no one knows about that.
Right. They have, like, sexual tension. They also sleep together during the raft school-sponsored trip, which is very funny to me. So everyone's getting laid during this school-sponsored raft trip thing. And then that's just kind of it until Between Us. There's a moment after that where, like, this is one of the moments I do find very funny, when Parm and team are, like, hanging out at the waterfalls after they've slept together, and they both look at each other and realize that they're both covered in fucking hickeys and have panic about needing to cover it up. And I'm like, you've been sitting in this waterfall for like 20 minutes. I think anybody who's gonna see, like, the evidence that you got dick down has already seen it. Like, I think you should just go with it.
Like, y'all haven't been subtle anyway. So everybody by that point already knows Dean and Parm are dating. So it's like,
well, he's literally invited. Like, Parm is not on the swim team. Parm makes desserts. So he was invited just as, like, okay, the university is going to pay for my boyfriend to come along on this trip because I want to have a more romantic setting to, like, take his virginity to. And I guess the university was just like, no, that tracks. That sounds like a fucking captain of the swimming team privilege. That makes sense.
Nepo babies, man.
It's just there's no fucking, like, faculty advisors at this school. It's just all student-run clubs. Nobody.
Maybe that's how it works. I don't know. Like, but it is very funny that just a lot of dicking down, I guess, at this little field trip. You know, the waterfall was very pretty, and the raft did look pretty cool. And oh my god, the Lay's chips thing. They really got that Lay's sponsorship.
I don't think I ate Lay's that much in my entire college career as they're suggesting that these, like, top athletes are eating, just hosing down Lay's chips and Thai desserts every single minute.
Yeah, I don't sports ball, but I know a lot of people that do. And that's not the life that they be living. That's the life they wish they could be living, but that's not the life.
No. Okay, yeah. So those are the stories. Over 17 episodes.
By the way.
17.
We should mention.
Hour-long episodes. Hour-long episodes.
We're not going to do an itemized list because I can't math. But, like, I know for me, one of the top reasons I find this show overhyped is because of its length.
Yes, hard agree. It is so long. Even, like, Thai BLs tend to be on the longer side anyways. Like, Thai BLs tend to be, like, 12-hour-long episodes. And even that, I'm often like, that feels like too much. Like, I don't think you needed this much time to tell this story. So for them to get, like, a full 17 fucking episodes, the pacing of the show is glacier. For shit. Like, it's so bad.
It's actually quite painful at times. Like, you know, for me, I say this about I've said this about Thai BLs before, maybe not on the pod, but, like, just in general. I feel like a lot of them, especially the older ones, would benefit more from being movies, because the issue, like, for me on why it's so difficult to get through a show that is this long, I mean, it's 17 out. Lord of the Rings, all 3 movies are not.
You can watch all of the extended editions. And I don't think it's quite 17 hours.
But my issue is that the plots are actually very thin. There's not a lot of story to drag out that long. And a lot of Thai BLs, especially the more low stakes, kind of university based or straight rom-com-esque shows, like if you watched a GMTV show, as I have, and I've had this problem with almost everyone I've ever watched, is that the story itself is very thin. Like, the plot, I should say, is always very thin. And it could just be condensed to, like, a 2-hour rom-com. And even this, I feel like, could be condensed to, like, a 2-hour drama.
Yeah, I think it could, too. Like, I think even just if they'd gotten like a normal 12, that would have helped a lot. I honestly think the story could have been perfectly well told in like a Moonlight Chicken amount of episodes. Like, I think 8 episodes would have been a much more reasonable amount of time to tell this particular story.
The 3 storylines, only 2 of them have any relevancy to each other. Like, Team and Win, I get why they're well liked. I get why they're popular. I do enjoy seeing the actor that plays Win. What is his name?
Bone.
I enjoy him. Like, he does have a screen presence to him, so he made like Win fun to watch. But he essentially is that best friend that plays basketball with the male lead in a rom-com. Like, let's be for real. Like, and that's all he needs to be, essentially. Like, he doesn't need like that side plot with him and Team is superfluous because it never intersects. And, like, they have nothing to really do with, like, the character development of Dean and Parm. They don't contribute anything to that. So they're just over in their own little bubble.
Right.
And I'm like, it's a cute bubble, but it's not a relevant bubble.
Right, and the thing that gets me about Win and Team is that I also enjoy Win and Team. Like, I think they're fun to watch. But as I was rewatching it, the thing I realized was that they never even know anything about this reincarnation shit. None of the friends, none of, like, Parm also has, like, a token straight girlfriend named Manao, and I think she's only there because they got that makeup sponsorship and they needed someone to plausibly be like wiping that like Claire's reject level makeup with absolutely no pigment. So like I genuinely think that's the only reason that character exists, which is a bummer because the actress is actually very funny and very like
she's
bubbly.
Enjoyable to watch on screen. And like, look, before anybody comes for us for the no pigment comment, like I know K-Beauty, I know that they are lighter on the pigment side, and even that snaps. Like, EC3 still be given some pigment, all right? Like, it does do something. That snaps look powdery.
But there's nothing there. This is maybe the thing that this is the one sponsorship that has ever bothered me the most, because I felt like with the drinks and the food, I just assume it tastes good because they say it does. Even with the fucking printer in Bad Buddy, I'm like, yeah, look at that. It printed a page. But with the makeup, I'm like, there's no difference on her skin. It does not look like she put makeup on. This is not a compelling argument for me to want to purchase this makeup. So yeah, but the thing that strikes me about this, rewatching it, is that Parm and Dean never tell any of this to Win and Team or to any of their other friends, because they like, I think Dean also has like one sort of named additional swim team friend. But they never say anything about this to any of them. And also, on the same side, Win and Team also never say jack shit about what they're doing to Dean and Parm. So it's this weird situation where I do kind of buy them as friends. Like, the scenes they have together do kind of hit as friendly. But it's very much like, I don't believe you guys are besties because both of you looked at the other and were like, I can't tell this man my reincarnation bullshit. It's like, he's not gonna be down. He's not gonna understand. So I think we'll just like leave that on the back burner and not take that to the homegirls. And it's just like, so then why are Win and Team, like, I love them, I think they should have been characters, but why do they have their like own whole separate sports BL? It's so weirdly atonal compared to like the drama and the highs and reincarnation and threat of fate. And then there's these two fucking chuckleheads who are like, we swim and badly. This is a side note. The funniest thing to me in the show was they're like, this is a top tier swim team. And then they didn't cast like 2 swimmers to be like body doubles who can actually dive into the water. So it's like, top tier swim team. These 2 like fucking chuckle fucks like propelling themselves into the water, belly flopping, and then like doggy paddling down the lane. And I'm like, I guess I don't know what the Thai college competitive swimming field looks like.
I feel like it's better than that. If people are getting scholarships, right? Like,
it's gotta be better.
And yeah, like, gosh, it's tonal dissonance. Like, and it's frustrating to me because it just adds more time to the fucking show, which makes it more of a slog to get through. Even though I enjoy Team and Win, it's still a fact of the matter that they don't interact with, like, the main plot. And if you were to compare it to other shows, especially more recently, because I feel like BLs always have had these really large casts that are pretty unnecessary.
Yeah.
But like if you compare it to more recent BLs that have large casts, like Pit Babe, which I haven't finished, but I feel like for the most part, all the characters in Pit Babe contribute something or are somehow interconnected to the plot in some way, shape, or form, even in small ways.
Yeah.
They are still engaged, and they might have their own
Right.
side stories, like their own subplots, I should say, not side stories, subplots, but they are still like Alan and Jeff.
Deeply invested in them.
They might be my favorite part of the show. There's like what's keeping me catching up. But they have their own subplot, but like separately, they still contribute other things to other characters into like the main plot overall, you know?
Right. Well, and like even like Sonic and North and Pit Babe, who are like the comedic relief, they're still involved in the main plot. And I think that's where it falls apart in Until We Meet Again, is that what characters in these like best friend positions should be doing in this kind of story is being like the one confidant that the main characters have to be like, okay, I need you to listen and not say anything until I tell you all of it, and also not freak out. And they need to be like the one who's like, no, I believe you, that tracks, what do you want to do about it? But they can't serve that role because they don't know what's happening. So it just kind of feels like pages of a script got mixed up and they were like, oh yeah, I guess we'll just leave it this way, sure.
No, I agree. And it sucks. Like because I think there are ways that you could have integrated them better instead of them feeling so separated.
Yes. You could even maintain their relationship. Like, I don't actually think the time that's taken to them, like, their friends with benefits thing is bad. I think you could have kept that, but just, like, they actually need to know the story that they're in. And it's so strange that they don't. So they do end up feeling, like, accidental.
Yeah, exactly. And I want to reiterate, because I don't want people to think that we dislike Win and Team, like, because I don't. It's not about that. Like, it's about
they're great.
The narrative overall, and it's just it doesn't mesh. It's a weird flavor in this 3-flavored cake. It's like when people add raisins or something to casseroles. I don't eat casserole. I'm Latin, but it's just does it go? Does it go really? Like, raisins are great on their own, but did it go in the tuna noodle? Is that what they put in casseroles? I don't know.
Well, and like the thing is too is that like they're not even like the only like kind of smaller stars in this show. We also have like an apartment full of like gay neighbors, one of whom is wearing the worst wig I've ever seen in any Asian media I've ever seen in my entire life.
And they're usually so good.
Like, all Asian media ever. It is a fucking Spirit Halloween reject that has been stapled to a very attractive man's head, and I don't know why they made that choice. It's so bad. But we have him, who's also dating the first of the Kin Porsche jump scares in this show, because he's dating Tawan. And, like, I do feel bad for that actor, because he was so good at Tawan that whenever he pops up in anything else, the first thing I think is that fucking guy, even though he's usually not playing, like, a villain. But it's just like, okay, Tawan jump scare. So you have all of those, and then both of them have like families that obviously become really important because this is all about family. So like Dean has a brother and a sister, and Parm also has a brother and a mom that live in the US for reasons. I don't remember why they live in I think his mom moved there. So like there's such a like an additional collection of actually relevant to the story side characters, where it's like we could have either just cut a whole bunch of this out and kind of streamlined it and simplified it, or time that was kind of spent watching Parm make desserts and Win and Team kind of stare at each other could have gone to these guys to kind of develop them more.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, to really bring home like the family thematic that the show was going for, and emphasizes but inconsistently is the issue, is that it's very inconsistent. And I understand that they probably added like Manao and Team and Win and stuff because you spend so much freaking time at the university, but like I don't give more budget, like that's probably unkind, like, but because the show does not have a big budget.
No. Well, and like I think for me, like the most obvious like comparison show at this point, I think, to Until We Meet Again is The Sign, which has not finished airing, but it's the same kind of idea. The Sign is doing it much more on like a mythology, like Naga and Garuda level, not necessarily just like, you know, two dudes level. But it's the same kind of thing where there's past lives, you're drawn to each other, that kind of thing. And I think the reason the sign works is, again, because everyone is connected to this main story and connected to this relationship that the main characters are building. Like, there's some, like, side stuff. Like, I did very much enjoy, like, 10 minutes we took to do the backstory of those other two guys on the team with how they got together, with the one being like, I'm not into men, and the other one being like, what if you reconsidered because I'm cute? And then 10 minutes later they were like fucking like rabbits in someone's dorm
just the
room.
most cringe fail way. But you know what, like,
it is the epitome of like, I can't believe I'm gonna sleep with him. You don't have to. No, I'm gonna. Like, that's what they are. So yeah, like it is a weird mixture of a show that has so much time. It had too much time to fill, but then a lot of like these other characters that are really relevant to the story end up feeling underdeveloped. So, and that's because we spend so much fucking time with Dean and Parm just like hanging out.
With them hanging out and him shaking like a scared chihuahua. Like,
oh my god.
Like, another reason why the time feels so long, because I'm not gonna front, like, I watch a lot of shows that will be long. Like, I'm a K-drama vet. I'm a C-drama vet. Like, I've watched every fucking episode of Word of Honor, and that snaps is like 36 episodes.
It's like 50.
Yeah, the Untamed.
Oh no, it's the
has
Untamed
50,
that has like 50
and
odd or
that was a little rough too. But that's just because I like the novel more. That's not about the actual pacing of the Untamed, which is not that bad. Like,
no,
my issues with the Untamed comes down to more like narrative and thematics than like its filmmaking or its pacing. But like, I've watched a lot of shows that are very, very long, and so it's not a matter of like just general length. It's not a matter of the show being 17 episodes. It's a matter of the way the narrative drags and also of the filmmaking. And I want to specify this because I feel like in fandom, like when conversations about filmmaking come up or cinematography come up, I see a lot of misinformation. Like, for example, for Until We Meet Again in particular, I saw a post that was like talking about the framing of the shots specifically. And the person had called it like peekaboo framing.
Oh, and God.
I have never heard of peekaboo framing in, you know, all my years of writing about film, studying film. I'm not a film expert, but I feel competent. Mildly confident, not an expert, but mildly confident. So I looked it up too because I'm like, I don't know everything, so maybe this is a thing. I googled this shit, and the only thing I could find was haircuts, like with like side bangs where your eyes would peek through or something. I learned something new because you know what? I did not know that was a specific type of haircut, was peekaboo bangs.
Well, and it's also the examples I remember from the person who's talking about that. It was literally just like the two characters and frame.
I think what they were thinking of is something called dirty framing, but they're using it incorrectly.
Yeah, I think so too.
Dirty framing, you need an object to obscure the subject of the shot in and of itself. Like, it can't just be objects in the same frame. They have to obscure the subject of the piece. So, like, if you have a character sitting down at a desk, like Midnight Museum, when Katha is, like, mourning the fact that Dome has left. By the way, everybody should watch Midnight Museum. I need more fanfic, and Gunn should have made out with that man. Yeah.
Gunn should have made out with that man. I also support this entirely.
Yes. If you want to see Catholicism done wrong in the best ways with like a lot of homosexual undertones and stuff, it's like Xena, but like weirder. But anyway.
Also, like, the funniest introduction to, like, two characters where one's just like, anyways, I come to this coffee shop every day and I don't drink the coffee, but I just watch you. And that's normal, right?
Just Dome, who Gunn plays, which everybody will know Gunn, you know, like one of the BL mainstays for actors.
Of Cooking Crush.
He's just like, yeah, that
currently
seems normal. Like, it's cool.
Who isn't watched by a customer at this failing coffee shop?
Like only two other customers. But there's a scene in the show where he's like mourning that Dome has left, and he's like staring at this photo of him. He has like a Pinterest board of pictures of this dude that he's not in love with, right? Like, baby, Chepito.
Very normal.
But there's objects in the frame with him. That's not dirty framing. Now, if there was like a window, and I feel like this is probably like a very typical shot of dirty framing. There was a window with like lattice bars, and you saw him through that window, that would be dirty framing because those lattice bars are specifically obscuring the character. Another example would be Godzilla 2014 has a lot of shots of dirty framing because what they're going for in the film is hiding Godzilla until like the final act of the film. Even though everybody fucking knows what Godzilla looks like, it was stupid. But that's an easy example of like what dirty framing is.
Right. Or in like not Kill Bill, Pulp Fiction, when they're opening the suitcase and you don't ever see what's in the suitcase, just the
Yeah,
glow
so
of the
it
light.
has to obscure the subject of the shot in and of itself from the audience, from the viewer. And for all that I've watched Until We Meet Again, and we watched, you know, episodes before this to kind of prep, I didn't see a single example of dirty framing. Like, if anything, like in the first episode, Corn and In, their second scene is open space. Like they are, it is open space, and they are in the frame, and it's just a regular mid shot. Like nothing special, you know.
Yeah, and to me that gets into like the big problem I have with like the way that this show is shot is that it's extremely utilitarian, which is fine. Like I have enjoyed shows where the cinematography is very much in the we are showing what's happening. We're not going to like push it. We're not going to do anything like super different or anything like that. That's not inherently a bad thing. But even beyond the way that it's filmed, it's like all aspects of it. Like in the first scene, right? First scene is in the past. There's nothing in that scene to really indicate that it happens in the past. Like the way these two different time periods are filmed is the same, and even the costuming is very very similar. I think there's like one or two points where In is wearing very 90s sweaters, but like for the most part there's no visual difference between past and present. There's nothing, not even like a color grade or like a sepia tone or something to just kind of visually remind you, no, this is happening
I like
20
that you
or 30
mentioned
years ago.
sepia tone because that was like my suggestion for something super cheap and easy.
Right, something that's not hard. Like you can slap that filter on in like fucking DaVinci, which you can get for free. Like you could make your whole thing
Yeah,
sepia toned in DaVinci. And even something like that would have done so much to kind of underscore the story that they're telling.
it's funny too because as we were kind of prepping for this episode, I have watched some K dramas recently, and they are able to delineate. They also deal with flashbacks or with like kind of world shifts. And they delineate those two very well. So, like, one was Marry My Husband, and in a similar fashion, it starts off in like a flashback esque mode at the beginning of episode one, and you notice this like when it shifts into the present day world because the aspect ratio and the color grading change. And whenever we're going back into like that past life or whatever, it does the same thing. The aspect ratio changes, and it goes from full screen to like widescreen, and the color grading gets a little bit warmer. And they do that throughout the entire show. It's very, very consistent. And another example is Love for Love's Sake, which is a Korean BL that just finished. Highly recommend that. That's on IQ. It's very good.
It's fantastic. It's so good.
One of the things that the show does is also play around with aspect ratio and color grading. And this is a show, because Marry My Husband is a pretty traditional K-drama, you know, with extra steps. It's a revenge story, which is popping in K-dramas right now. And, you know, it has obviously more of a budget than Until We Meet Again. But Love for Love's Sake also has a very small budget, you can tell. But smart in the way it uses its editing and its cinematography, and it works well within the budget that it has. And so when we have the character go back to like the real world, quote unquote, the aspect ratio gets larger and the color changes just a little bit. It's also warmer.
Yeah, it feels like gold.
And then when you go into the game world, as it were, like the aspect ratio changes again, and it's also like bluer, cooler toned and such.
Yeah, it's like suggesting like computers or tech in a very like low key kind of subtle way.
Yeah, exactly. And it's like when I see color theory being discussed in BL fandom overall, it's usually more literal, like this person's wearing a red shirt and this means they're angry, et cetera, which is not incorrect necessarily. I mean, I'm not going to get into color theory and how it changes depending on culture. In film, color theory is much more than just that kind of literal, the curtains are blue. It also is like the hue of the thing, you know? Like what colors are emphasized and saturated in a piece of media.
Yes.
Like the Matrix is green because it matches the digital code. Like whenever they're in the Matrix.
Right. I mean, even like if you look at like Sin City, which is kind of driving home significant colors to like its most extreme as you can do in a movie where everything is in black and white except for these very specific things that are like bright red or bright yellow.
Mm-hmm.
Like that's kind of like the far edge of like an extremely significant color. But like you said, it's like if I'm talking about like thinking about like significant costumes, the one that comes to mind for me first is the green dress in Atonement. And
Yes.
it's not just that dress is green. It's that that dress is that particular kind of like saturated green. It's like the fabric of that dress. It's the way that it's cut. It's the way that it sits on Keira Knightley. Like especially when you talk about costuming, it's not usually just about like the color. It is about how the color works on the garment, how the garment is put together. And I think in BLs there's kind of a tendency to be like, oh, well that's like that shirt, like you said, that shirt is that color. And I'm like, yeah, but if you go on like H&M's website, that shirt is also on clearance for $6. So probably what happened is that some like PA was told, go get a shirt for this scene, and like that's what they grabbed.
Yeah.
Which you can do significant stuff with costuming with a lesser budget. Like I think Kaseki actually does a really good job with making like significant costuming choices with what was clearly a limited budget. But especially in a show like this where you really want people to understand that we're talking about two stories and two lives intersecting, to have done so little to like visually distinguish them, I think is a real disservice to the story that they're telling. And I think especially too if you're setting something in university in like Thailand where people wear uniforms. So it's already going to be a little bit harder to distinguish from past and present because like black slacks and white button downs haven't changed that much in 30 years. But then you don't really see it either with the stuff they wear outside of school.
Mm-hmm.
Like you can see it a little bit with the sets, but not a ton.
Yeah.
So like in some ways I think it actually serves rather to like, instead of making them feel like more resonant, like closer together, it just makes them feel flat.
Mm-hmm.
When like I think emphasizing those differences more would have served them better.
Yeah, I agree. And it goes back to like why the show for me is such a slog, because the filmmaking isn't interesting to watch. Like there's nothing interesting in the way the camera moves. It's very, very static. Like it's the same types of shots used over and over. You have like a close up, a mid close up, a mid wide shot, a wide shot. You have, you know, your two person frame, your 3-person frame, etc., etc. It's all very simplistic, which isn't bad, you know? Like Kiseki is a good example of a show that's not super complicated, right? But like the camera work is a little more interesting, the editing is a little more interesting, the costuming is better. Like we all go crazy for like ID's collars, you know?
Love the stupid collars. But like it's like the collars too, but it's also the fact that he's constantly wearing 85 layers.
Yes.
And that everything he wears is too big for him. And like it really serves to underline the like clothing is armor kind of thing. In addition to it being very funny that this like little murdery cat of a person is also wearing this rainbow sweater.
Yes, yeah, exactly.
That like contrast is really funny. And like Zhang Yi only wears like the palest of like whites and creams, which I think is also very funny as a choice for a high schooler. You know what? Someone, I forget who said it. So I was talking to someone and they saw what I was like looking at pictures of Zhang Yi, and she said something like, "Yeah, he looks like Lan Zichen if someone was doing like dress like fucking The Untamed but modern." And now that's all I see when I look at it is modern Lan Zichen.
Well, I'm not going to be able to
Side
unsee
note.
that now.
Anyway, I'm sorry. That and Bottom's arms not moving. I fill you with curse knowledge.
The group chat has just cursed me with so much knowledge that I'll never be able to unsee. Just Boba Suck is going to live in my brain forever. Y'all have to just stick around for me to explain that inside joke. So, but yeah, like, all those things combined make for a very boring experience to watch for 17-hour-long episodes. Like, Kaseki and Love for Love's Sake are both, 8 episodes long? Wait, no, Kaseki's a little longer, isn't it?
I think Kaseki is 12.
Yeah, but they're 30 minutes.
They're half-hour episodes, but like the runtime of the actual episodes is usually like 20 or 23 minutes. Like they're condensed. Mm-hmm. These are like fully 55-minute long episodes for Until We Meet Again.
You feel every fucking
17
minute of those
them.
goddamn...
Every fucking minute of them. And I think what gets me too is, like, even for me, who is not like a filmmaker, there's so many like fairly obvious like different kind of symbolisms they could have drawn upon. Like the red string of fate is used very literally in this show.
Mhm.
So you could have used that more, right? Like you could have had red objects visually tying characters together. Like you could have done something with that. And instead, it feels like everyone's costume out of like some guy's closet. And I think especially when you're talking about a show that's kind of has like some really intense themes, right? Like we're talking about people who have died by suicide because of horrible family drama and lack of acceptance, and two souls that are like truly deeply connected, enough so that they have like reincarnated to need a second chance to like try again with a better ending. To have the costuming and the visuals of it and everything feel so flat, it feels like it can kind of compresses like the heights the story could have gone to if there had been more like panache in the way that it was like filmed.
Yeah, ironically enough, I think this is partially at least a factor in why Win was such a standout, because his silhouette is stronger. Like he's got the blonde hair, he's got, as awful as those Harry Styles inspired tattoos are,
they're so bad.
Like he has the tattoos and stuff, and he's got like the sexy smirk thing going on for him and stuff. So he sticks out.
A lot of piercings.
Yes, a lot of the piercing stuff. So he sticks out against them, against everybody else who is just very... It's like if they were spice, they'd be flour. Like,
yes.
And I'm like, just a little bit of paprika could have helped this, you know?
I was going to say, my favorite curse knowledge about Win that someone pointed out to me is that, like, they were not bleaching his hair consistently. So between scenes, like, the amount of bleach and grown-out roots in his hair, even between, like, shots within a scene, is often wildly different. And now that's, like, primarily what I notice about him when I was going back and rewatching it, is keeping track of, like, where the root situation was.
The editing on the show is not good.
It's not good.
Like, there's a scene in episode 1 where Parm is, I think, going, like, sleeping or something, or he's researching Dean because he's like, why do I feel so drawn to him, blah, blah, blah. And there's music playing, and that music has a hard stop, and then there's a hard cut to go into the corn and in scene. And it's so jarring. And yeah, this was just, it's just not great editing, you know? And like, as we talk about, like, the filmmaking and stuff that makes it kind of difficult to get through, again, 17 hours of this. We also kind of have to talk about the acting, because the acting is also one of the reasons why this show can be a little difficult to get through.
My problem is that there are 3 very good actors in kind of the main 4. And then there's Ohm. Which, he's so pretty, right? Like, he's so pretty. He's so, like, carved from marble. And the problem is, he acts like he's carved from marble in the sense that he doesn't move his facial muscles
he is,
a lot.
Like, carved from marble is actually pretty apt, in my opinion, because for me too, he is the weakest of what I would constitute as the 4 main actors, which play Dean, Parm, Corn, and In. So Kuhart, Fluke, and Cow.
Yes. And
I feel like those 4 range from good to, like, really good in their roles. And then Ohm is there. Like, he gives the energy of, like, the little standing guy emoji a lot of the time. And it only feels like... This isn't an insult to him. Like, if we're going to talk about the benefits or the pros and cons of a piece of media, I feel like it's only fair to talk about the acting in a constructively criticism-ish way, or not. I don't get paid for this, as it were. But it's not an insult to him. Like, this is the only thing I've watched him in. I watched him in one other show with Fluke that came out after this. I don't even remember what it was called. It was very, very boring. But I haven't watched, like, Bake Me Please. So maybe he's gotten better, you know? I'm willing to believe that. Like, Darren Criss was not great on Glee, but he was great on An American Crime Story, you know? We grow. We grow.
No, that's fair. That's fair.
But his acting is so stiff that it detracts from the plot. Like, it detracts from the story. And it makes it harder to get through. Like, it's part of the reason why it feels like a slog to get through at times.
So, like, I think with Dean as a character and the way Dean is acted, I look at it in two ways that I think it doesn't super work. So on like Dean, just as Dean, the character, as Ohm acts him, he feels like he's in a much lower stakes show. So, like, given the intensity of the things that he should be feeling, right? Like, he is the reincarnation of someone who chose to end his own life because he could not see a way out of the situation that he was in. And it doesn't ever really feel like Ohm reaches that intensity. So I will say, I think Fluke and Kuhart are fantastic. And I think Cow was good. Part of what makes Fluke and Kuhart so fantastic is that they both act very beautifully on their own, right? Like, Fluke is carrying the present on his back. Like, he is cracked in half like a glow stick, carrying the weight of the present storyline on his back. Cracked in half, holding like just fucking sacks of desserts in both hands. What really elevates them as people who are sort of playing the same character is there is a resonance there, in that if you look at Parm and you look at In, you can feel it. Like, you can feel like, yeah, this seems like characters who are connected. There is something in there that like rings true of like, yes, Parm feels like someone who could be reincarnated from who In was. Now, for my money, and this is writing, not anything else, I really wish Parm had been given a little bit more of In's like go-getter energy. I would have loved to see Parm have even just a fractional amount of the like, I'm gonna go get my man, I'm gonna climb him like a tree, I'm gonna kiss him in public whenever I feel like, and we're gonna live happily ever after. Well, the thing I hate most about the way Parm is written as a character is that he never stops feeling scared of Dean in the whole show. No matter how many times they kiss or how many times they sleep together, he still, like, freezes up like a little chihuahua every time Dean gets close to him. And it leaves this very weird tinge of, like, why are you afraid of him? Like, I understand at the beginning, like, the intensity is there and you don't know why you're so drawn to him. But, like, you guys have Rod now. Like, you had your whole fucking raft vacation and you're still, like, tensing up like you've never seen an ankle before. And it's not, there's, like, not really a reason given for that.
And I also hated it.
It's very
like,
Victorian.
Like, there's a certain point where it almost feels like the show is using the trauma as an excuse to push that whole blushing maiden thing, like, onto Parm. And that's what I don't like. It does. Like, it comes to a certain point where it's like, look, as a story, we should have developed beyond this, you know? And it doesn't help that Fluke is, like, so good at it. Like...
He's so good. He's so good at just shaking. It's part of... So I did start watching Shadow, which is a show that he's in recently that's a horror show, where, like, his ability to convey, like, shivering fear is used much more effectively. He's very good at it. Like, he's very good at that, like, wide-eyed terror. It just hits weird when it's with, like, the person he ostensibly has loved for 2 lifetimes. In contrast to the way that, like, Parm and In resonate as, like, a shared person, none of that is there for Dean and Korn. And that, to me, really, like, kneecaps a lot of the resonance of Dean's side of this story. Because he doesn't feel at all like Korn, and Korn doesn't feel at all like him. Like, we're told that it's a reincarnation, but, like, there's none of that, like, synchronicity, none of that, like, vibe that makes them feel like there's a thread of soul that connects them. And because In and Parm is so good at it, it's so much more striking than if even, like, In and Parm had been good but not great. Like, I think in some ways Ohm does suffer for the fact that he's surrounded by very, very good performances that make him, I think, look even more stiff than he would look like in a more bog standard, like, university BL, where he was just, like, the stoic top. Oh, God, he just sticks out so much. Even, like, factor, like, Win and Team's actor, I think this was the first thing he'd done, I think. So there's, like, some, like, awkward newness to his acting, but, like, you believe that they feel something for each other. Like, you believe that there's, like, weird feelings that they don't quite know how to deal with. And then Dean is just standing there looking like a fucking cyborg. Just standing there, like, unblinking with the same expression, whether, like, he's confessing his love or finding out that about a past life, or, like, it's like there's no variation of expression. The way he looks watching swimming practice is the same way he looks standing looking at fucking Parm with a gun in his hand in the apartment. Like, it's the same face.
There are times, I noticed this in episode 1 when I was rewatching, and like he's being introduced to like the newbies of the team and the swim team and such, and I'm looking at him and I'm just like, I can hear the Wii music in your head. And it's just, and it's like, and what makes that scene worse, for lack of a better term, is that he's looking at Parm, like, and if you pay attention to their reactions, like you know the exact moment when Parm sees Dean, because Fluke's face changes.
Yes.
Like, his eyes get a little wider, and they get a little bit tearier, you know, like slowly. Like, his mouth drops open.
Right. Yeah, you see this, like, surprise, but also a little bit of fear, but also, like, you see, like, a really fantastic, like, tangle of why is my chest exploding looking at this guy who I've never met.
And then, like, the
before.
camera will cut to Dean's face, and you would...
And Dean is waiting for Subway. Like,
Dito na
Dean's
Subway.
just standing at the end of the counter waiting for his sandwich.
You look at Dean's face in that same scene, and you could not tell that he is looking at Parm because his facial expressions do not change. Like, his mouth is kind of open, but his eyes are empty. Like, there's no energy behind it. He reminds me a little bit, this is such a deep cut, and now I'm going to get even more fans upset. But, like, he reminds me a little bit of Tanner, who plays Robbie in Cobra Kai. Like, they have this where they're both really pretty. But they have the same, like, kind of, like, dead-eyed, open-mouth way of acting, because they're too raw still. They're too new.
Well, it's like, if Book is the everyman person who just kind of stands there making the same face, Ohm is, like, the beautiful man person who stands there making the same face. But I think of them a lot when I watch them act, especially in, like, more, like, romantic or intense, like, feeling scenes, is that they both kind of have this same, like taking in emotions face, and you see the person they're acting with, like, giving them everything, like giving them facial expressions, giving them body language, giving them, like, big tears, and they're just like, yeah, feelings. And I'm like, anything, give me anything.
We're doing romance, not jury duty here, guys. Like,
right? Yes,
and
exactly.
It's really noticeable because there's a scene. You actually had brought this up when we were pre-gaming a little bit. There's a scene where Dean is angry at Korn. You know, he's learned all this stuff. And Ohm is, like, acting, and he's breaking down. And it's noticeable because, like, now the emotions are so high, it's like he has to act. And it's not bad, but it's not great either.
No, it's not great. But at least it's something, right? Like, if I have to pick a scene where I think that he's getting there, it's that scene in the car where he is realizing, like, the full extent of what happened and is so mad at Korn for hurting in that way that he's just like kind of yelling at himself too. That kind of, like, self-recrimination of, like, what were you thinking? Why did you do this? But, like, directed inward. And even just, like, that energy, even if I don't think it's as believable as, like, Fluke's total breakdown in the finale, wherein, like, overwhelms him to the point that he loses himself, it still would have been better than the evenness of what he gives the rest of the time. He
seems to have, like, two main facial expressions, which are, like, that super stoic, empty face, you know, where he's supposed to be just hot and stoic. And then, like, where it's, like, the horny. Smallest little quirk of, like, a smile, you know, when he's, like, hot for Parm or, like, slightly charmed and such. And it's like, I need more. Like, Dean is one of the leads. He has, like, the most screen time after Parm, probably, if you broke it down, you know, mathematically. Mm-hmm. And it makes their story weaker because he is just not up to it. He's just not up to the task.
Yeah. And I think what kills me, too, is that I also think it serves to make Korn's acting, or the way Korn is acted, look weaker too. But I don't actually think that what Cow did with Korn was actually weak. Like, there's a reason that for me, if I ever get the urge to rewatch the show, I'm just watching, like, a supercut of Korn and In, because their stuff is fantastic. Like, the chemistry is there. Like, they very much feel like two people who are deeply in love with each other and who are deeply into each other. to the point where you're like, yeah, I can buy that these two would end up dying the way they die, the same way I can buy that they would like just straight up refuse to break up, that they would just be like, that's not happening, like, and I don't care what you say, I don't care what my dad says, I don't care, like, we're gonna live together and we're gonna be happy and we're gonna make it work. And again, tragic ending, but considering like that could feel almost melodramatic, right? Especially because they're still in college, you know, it could very easily kind of end up feeling like the Little Mermaid of like, daddy, I love him, but it doesn't. It feels like you feel it, like you understand what makes the reincarnation feel plausible is how well Kuhart and Cow acted in Korn, that because they seem so connected and so real, you're like, yeah, no, I believe that these two particular like lovers would find each other in the next life. Like, I believe in the intensity of that connection. And Fluke is giving that. Like, Fluke also, like, Fluke feels it. I'm like, yeah, absolutely. Fluke feels like someone who has had a whole life dumped into his head that he's trying to deal with. And then Ohm is like sitting there listening to his grandma tell him a story about Korn, but he's not paying attention.
Yeah, it's part writing, part directing, part his like his ability, you know? Because sometimes actors do get handed parts that they are just not suited for, and it doesn't matter how good they are. Yeah. Like, they're just not going to give, like, the best performance. It could depend on how they're acted. Like,
yeah, they made First sing in Only Friends. Like, that was not fair to anyone.
For that embarrassment.
I hope he did, too. It's still so funny to me that they were like, yeah, you're going to play the singer. We're not going to have you sing the actual theme song. Like, we're not stupid. We're going to have Cow sing the theme song. But you're going to play the bar singer.
They did that just so that he could be the top, which I hate. That's a whole separate conversation, though, folks.
We already talked about
episode
Only
1.
Friends.
Check it out. Shameless plug. But yeah, so it's like, for me, just Ohm is so. There are times when like a newbie actor will act against like a vet actor, you know. First thing that always pops into my head is like The Devil Judge. The two actors in that, one of them years of experience, the other new.
I mean, hell, even Kin Porsche, like, Appo's been acting for a long time, and this was like, I think the first thing like Mile had ever done. So even there, new actors can act against seasoned actors.
Yeah, and there are times when like a seasoned actor can enhance the performance of the newbie, you know, through like guidance or just challenging the newbie to like rise to their level, which is what I think happened in like Devil Judge in particular, because I've seen the K-pop. I know his name, but I don't know his name. But he was a member of the K-pop group GOT7. No one asked me about K-pop. I don't care.
So I don't know anything about K-pop except for what you've told me about the one guy from
Jimin. I've seen
BTS.
so many people say that
Jimin.
Perm from the one that plays Team looks like Jimin, and I'm like,
oh boy,
I'm like, oh yeah,
I can get it. Yeah, I can see it.
But yeah, like in that situation, you see this in other like, you know, things and such, where like a newbie actor will feel challenged and they'll try harder to meet the level of the vet actor, and then other times they either can't or they don't feel challenged, and the vet actor ends up acting circles around them. Like, and I feel like we have a latter situation here where Fluke just acts circles around him. And it makes the story of Dean and Parm, jarring, and just I have a harder time investing in it because the acting isn't there.
Yeah, and I think too, what I also don't like about it is I feel like it serves to kind of undermine what Fluke is doing at certain parts, because it makes Fluke feel a little bit hysterical. Because he's not getting much in return, it kind of makes his very good and very appropriate acting feel a little bit too much at some points. And I think that sucks, because I think, again, given the stakes here, given like past lives, reincarnation, all of this shit, being up is the more understandable emotional reaction to have, versus just being like the thing that always gets me in like the final scene, not the final scene, like the final confrontation in the apartment where Parm like has the gun in his hand. It is basically saying like, I'm going first this time. Like it is like the culmination of like In's heartbreak and rage and all of that. And Dean is just kind of standing there being like, baby, no, baby, don't, I'm here. And I'm like, this man is about to like start shooting and you are reacting like he's mad that you're late for dinner on a Tuesday night. Give him something. And then like all the family shows up, which is a lot of like very fantastic older actors that are all there, like, and Dean is just given like middle school theater, and you gotta at least give me like college theater. Like, I need to believe there was at least an audition between you and this
Yeah,
role. Like,
it's
anything.
rough. Like, and it sucks because even with like shitty writing, you know, like the writing might not be all there.
Yeah.
An actor can still elevate that to the point, you know, where I can be like, yeah,
Absolutely.
like the story might not fully be there, but like I can still enjoy the performance. Like The Sign is kind of a good example, as we were saying earlier, about how like it also deals with reincarnation. And the thing that I noticed is that like Billy and Babe sell the fuck out of
Oh, from the very first second they see each other. Like, there is not one single moment of that show where you don't intensely feel how much they want to bone down and how insane they are about each other. Like, not fully even appreciating how ridiculous they are about each other because, so far as they're concerned, they're being very normal about the amount of feelings that they have about this person. It
yes.
crackles between them, which is part of like I think why like the sex scene hits so hard in that show is because you've had two whole ass dream sequences, so you know how both of those dudes have been like having their sweetest dreams about this moment. So when it finally happens, it's just
Yeah.
like just
Like,
goes
and
off.
they are able to build such tension, you know, and you really feel like
Yeah.
they have this weight on them that is drawing them together at every moment that they are near each other. And you only get that one-sidedly from Parm's side because of the way Fluke is playing him, and I don't feel like
Yeah.
you get that from Dean's side because Ohm can't reach that level.
Yeah, and I think thinking about it now, kind of realizing as we're talking about it, this is a show that doesn't really have an antagonist, really. Like, there is no bad guy in this show. You could kind of argue that either of their dads are the bad guys, but that really only comes up for In and Korn specifically. There's like one completely unnecessary aggressive guy in Drama Club that like hits on Parm, despite Parm absolutely being a blank wall of like, I do not consider you at all at him. But there's no like villain, right? There's no like Chalathon like in The Sign. There's no bad guy. And because there's not even that to kind of give context to what Dean and Parm are doing, I think that makes Ohm's acting feel even weaker because it just it has to stand on its own. The story is so internal. Like, it is the most internal a story could possibly be. It's about them as people in two different lives. And Ohm just does not hit the stakes of that. He like you said, he doesn't rise to that level. It's funny because I feel like he almost would have been better if he'd been playing like Win and Team. Like, if he had been in the kind of like hot best friend who's having like a friend with benefits thing, I think he would have shown much more in that role. But it kills me, right? Because he's the second lead. And like, I don't think the show is fantastically written, and I don't think it's fantastically filmed. I think with a different person playing Ohm, it could have been a much more enjoyable watch.
Yeah, because at least then, like, the Dean and Parm scenes wouldn't feel like kind of a slog to get through at times. Because, and you know, we can segue into the writing after this, but, you know, well, first I have to give a shout out to Kuhart because he's such a standout.
Oh, Kuhart's
And
fantastic.
what I like about his performance is he's so charming that the audience falls in love with in almost the same way that Korn falls in love with In. Like, this actually is probably a good segue into writing because, like, with Dean, Ohm plays him so stoic. He feels like a stock top romance character. Like, he feels like every, you
He
know,
does.
like, stoic, toppy, dommy-esque romance lead honestly in, you know, BL or in Hent dramas, like, for real. And Cal plays Korn, and the writing helps him in this regard as much more like an internal person. Like, he is an isolated person. He doesn't feel stoic. He feels alone. He feels isolated. So, like, when he meets In, it is like the sunshine coming into his life almost. And Kuhart literally plays it like in Touch's Sunshine, and it comes through. It comes through so well, and it helps their story be so much more believable because you really understand why Korn falls in love with In Touch, but and Cal plays that so well. Where he like slowly opens up.
Yes. Like, there's that one scene, like, I think it's after he's had it out with his dad one time where they're in the field and like In goes in and steals the kiss, and then you can kind of see Corn decide, you know what, fuck it, I don't care what my dad says, and he like flips him
Mm-hmm.
over and like kisses him. Like those moments hit so well because you feel with Corn. Like part of it is too, like we know he has kind of different stakes. Like we know he's dealing with a very shitty dad and a crime family, and like and that comes up like immediately in their introduction. In's friends are like, you should definitely not pick that guy. That guy is fucking a mafia brat. In is like, I hear you. I'm ignoring you though. So like you understand why Korn is so isolated and so withdrawn and so like internal. And even when you meet his family and you're like, oh, he's the oldest brother. This also makes sense that he's very like controlled and locked down because he's got these brothers that he's keeping an eye out for too, and a dad who is very willing to like pop him across the face if
Mm-hmm.
he doesn't do what he's told. But Dean doesn't even have that, like those stakes. Like he's got siblings, his like home life seems fine. His dad is the second Kin Porsche jump scare. Fucking Corn from Kin Porsche is his dad. So like so many Kin Porsche villain jump scares in the show with the casting. But so like his stoicness, his quietness doesn't feel like a character choice. It just feels like it was the best Ohm could do.
It does, yeah, it does. And like the writing does him no favors either, to be fair to him, because Dean's a very flat and honestly boring character. There's not a lot to him.
He swims. That's his personality. He swims and he looms.
He swims not very well, not in a way that's believable.
Very badly.
And yeah, he does a lot of looming, but it doesn't even give like sexy, intense looming. Like again, like how Billy and Babe are as Paya and Tarn in The Sign. Like when there's looming, because Babe is very tiny. I actually don't know if he's short or if like Billy is just fucking tall.
But like Billy and Yai, the guy that plays Yai, don't. Maybe it's just like he's just surrounded by really tall people. When fucking Pia gets in Tarn's space, there's tension that immediately ratchets up. Like it doesn't feel like he's just standing over Tarn. He's standing over Tarn with intent. Like this, like he's not normal about this, and like Dean just feels like he doesn't have a good concept of personal space.
And like, and I don't know if that was direction either. Again, to I guess be fair to Ohm, like I don't know if that was direction either, because honestly, I do believe stoic characters can be hard to play. I remember that the actor who plays one of the leads in The Untamed got a lot of like criticism for his portrayal.
Oh,
but, like,
yeah.
That character is very difficult to play.
That character is like eyebrows acting. He says probably less than 100 words in the entire 5 volumes of the novel. And it's a lot of it's just repeating shameless. Like probably 35 of them are him saying shameless.
Yeah, internal character. Like, you know,
Yeah.
but stoic characters, they can be played with emotion still. And it's a combination of like the directing, the acting, and the writing. And Ohm doesn't have the acting ability yet. The directing doesn't really seem to direct him in that area. And it's kind of like, you know, just be a seimei top romance trope. And then the writing doesn't really give Dean anything to work with either as a character. Like you said, his home life seems pretty Gucci. Like he was raised away from his siblings by his grandmother, but there doesn't seem to be any like contention or tension between the siblings or anything like that. He's well liked at school.
Yeah, like they're not close, but they don't like dislike each other, and they figure out how to like come together as a sibling group.
Yeah, he's not only well liked at school, he's popular. He's like one of the most popular dudes at school. Not that he seems to care or anything like that. Like his friendship with Win is actually probably the only bright spots of his character because it draws some sort of personality out of him.
Because they do actually feel like friends.
But then it goes back to that whole thing of like they don't talk to each other about what's actually happening in their lives, so it feels like a shallowly written friendship.
Yeah. It feels like really like the screen time is disproportionate to the story. So like obviously In and Korn have less screen time. They're getting like flashbacks. Like there's not even like a very special episode that is kind of like about them. It's just flashbacks. They have the much more interesting story with many more elements going on. And I think in some ways because you know it's building towards tragedy, because the very first thing you ever see in this show is when they die. Like I was always so hungry for more of them, and it felt like the balance between like Dean and Parm and dropping the more and more about In and Korn, I wanted them flipped. Like I wanted the amount of screen time that In or that Parm and Dean were getting to be for In and Corn, and then for Parm and Dean to have like the more reduced role. Because I think also as a viewer, it's hard to care about swim practice or like going to class when what I wanted more of was like, what were these two doing in their last day that they didn't know was their last day? Like, what were they planning? Like, what was going on with them? And instead, you're like, would you like to watch Parm make
Like the
another Thai dessert?
60th Thai dessert.
The 700th Thai dessert.
Like, don't get me wrong, it's great to learn more about Thai desserts. Like, I think that's neat. But, like, I don't know, make it relevant to the plot, at least. Like, have them start, like, a baking, cooking competition or whatever. Make a plot, make a subplot out of it. Because that's the problem with their story, is it feels very by the numbers overall. And that's what makes it hard for me to invest in, like, Dean and Parm, which sucks because they are our leads. Like, they are the main story. Like, they have the most screen time. And the most interesting aspects of their story is the Corn and In Touch stuff. And I'm way more interested in that because that has stakes. That has conflict, both internal and external conflict. Like,
yeah.
Dean and Parm, if you remove the reincarnation bit from them, you have just a very standard university BL. They look at each other, they're into each other, they start talking. Dean, like, you know, looms a couple times. They decide to sort of kind of go out. They end up dating, they kiss. You have like a mid-series rival that appears that is not a rival because there's no tension there.
Because Parm does not care at all. 0% caring. He's literally like, this isn't my club. I would very much like to be removed from this narrative. I am just delivering lunches that I have been like conned into making for all of my useless fucking friends who found out I could cook and were immediately like, great, fantastic. There's my meal plan for the rest of my college experience.
Honestly, that character is so superfluous because there's no tension there. Like, there's no question that Parm is going to choose him because he's not.
Fucking, it's like Mew and Ray had more like potential than this guy. Like, it's also like, you're in a fucking soulmate show. Like, why do you need to add this? Like, more so than any other BL, where we know they're going to end up together because it's Thailand, and they always end up together in Thailand. And, I mean, they end up together in most countries, but like Korea and Japan will sometimes like shake it up a little. We know they're soulmates. We know they're going to get together. So what is the point of this rival? Because it just feels like you realized you'd written 14 episodes of content and then you were just grasping.
Essentially, yeah. It's filler. That's what it is. It's like anime filler, and like I skip it because it's pointless. It's a waste of my time. It's bad writing. You know, it's what makes Dean and Parm's story overall really difficult for me because it's so by the numbers. Like, you know, they get through the dating, the rival, they get through like the first time, you know, and then even after that, like Parm is still giving teacup Yorkie energy every time Dean tries to hit it again.
He's just so shivery all the time.
At that point, it's like, I'm just like, you've already, you know, like, at least have a conversation about it. I think if they were going to continue on with that blushing maiden trope thing or whatever, they could have at least had a conversation about it where it became like a character trait or maybe like a character conflict where Dean was like, is this a trauma response or something? Like,
right. Like, it makes like Parm feel weirdly inconsistent because there's not really a reason that's given for like, we can kiss this episode but not this one, and we're gonna sleep together in this one, but then I'm still gonna shiver when you get too close to me in this next one. And it's like, what's happening here? And I think what gets me too is like, even compared to like roles with much less screen time, like I found the like bad wig cousin, even with the bad wig, had much better like presence within the story than Dean did. Like even fucking Tawan like had much better presence within the story. And it's like, if you're being outshone by like in some ways characters that exist purely for plot reasons, which I mean, I guess you could argue all characters exist for plot reasons, but like they don't have much that they're doing outside of like the plot functions that they're serving. That's not a good sign. Like you're supposed to be the lead here, my dude.
And it's wild too because Dean is the one that goes on like little side detective journey to figure out who Corn and In are, but it just never feels like there's urgency to that.
Yeah, exactly.
You know, partly like one factor is Ohm's acting, but also the writing because it's so drawn out. Like these things are so and they're intercut with like all this filler bullshit that cuts the urgency of what's happening.
You know what it made me think of as I was kind of rewatching it? It made me think of the fucking conversation in Scum Villain where the main character is talking to the author about like, why did you do all this shit? And the author's just like, cause I was publishing 5,000 words a fucking day. Do you know how much time you have to edit when you're publishing 5,000 words a day? Whatever gets on the page is what's getting published. Get off my dick about it. Like, that's what it feels like. It feels like this is such
Mm-hmm.
a first draft where everything they could think of was kind of thrown in and nothing was edited. There's no kind of realization of like, this is way too much just hanging out at college for this story. We can cut all of that out. We need to have like these characters doing more. We need to have this. We need to have that. Like, it feels so rough draft. Thinking about it, the problem is that Ohm feels like he's the guy who's been pulled in to read lines in rehearsal where he's not supposed to act. Everyone's acting around him, but he's the one that's on book because he's actually like the stage manager because like Timmy has laryngitis and isn't going to be at rehearsal
We're gonna
today.
get canceled because we're picking on Ohm so much. I don't. This is not personal.
He seems like a sweet person. Yeah, he seems like a lovely person and he's very beautiful. And honestly, he's beautiful enough to probably get through life just being beautiful.
And it's like, look. Again, maybe he's gotten better. I hope he has, genuinely, because I do believe that actors can grow.
The gifts of baking
Yeah,
are not.
I don't feel like
promising.
they are either. There's still some, but you know what? I've seen at least 4 facial expressions in those gifs, and that's 2 more than what I got from him in this show.
You know what?
So, but you know
That's
what? Like,
true.
maybe he'll just find his, like, Vanessa Hudgens is not Emmy worthy of anything, but you know what? That she has found her niche,
You know
and
what?
everybody can
That's
find their
true.
niche and be enjoyable. Like, so yeah, like for me, like, again, the writing doesn't do Dean any favors because he feels like a stock character, especially in comparison to Korn, who feels so much more fully realized, and In feels so much fully realized. And I have my issues with Parm, mostly the teacup Yorkiness of him all, and I don't give him a ton to do other than like make desserts and be just sweet. It's like what you said, like the story of Korn and In is where like the stakes are, is where the actual conflict is stemming from. Like in my rewrite world, like if we were gonna second draft this as it needed to be, I would have actually focused on Korn and In and like made it more of like a semi mystery show, and actually done something where like we go into the future and it's not a reincarnation story, it's about like older gay men, and like maybe Korn and In had survived in some way, shape, or form, and you just don't know it. The audience doesn't know it off the bat. Like, and then the story could be about them
Yeah.
refinding each other, and coming together again, and then finding out like how they fell in love as young men, at 19, the incident, their recovery. Because for me, I've seen stories like Korn and In many, 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 many times. Like, if you are a 90s kid like me,
Yes, like you have seen this movie. This is Boys Don't Cry. This is like Brokeback Mountain, which actually Brokeback Mountain, great example of a
mm-hmm.
very good stoic character that is given a shit ton of like resonance, even though he's like one of the most buttoned down
That is a
characters of all
great
time.
example, yeah. Ennis, yeah. It's
Ennis is
extremely, extremely
fantastic.
reserved. And I know it's probably unfair, because it's the late Heath Ledger, and Heath Ledger was just a good actor in general. But Heath Ledger also got a start in romantic comedies, So yeah, so for me, it's like what I actually wanted to see, like in this second draft rewrite fantasy of mine, what I wanted to see was the resolution of them getting a happy ending, because to me, that would have been more cathartic to me instead of the reincarnation type of storyline, because I just was not invested at all in Dean and Parm.
Yeah.
And I wanted to see the kids that suffer get a happy ending themselves. I don't think that'd be for everyone. I do think reincarnation storylines are actually really cool. I actually really do like them. I just don't think it fully worked in this show.
I think like if we had gone with a world where like the reincarnation is the thing that's not changing, right? Like so if you say you have to keep the reincarnation thing, what I either need is a much narrower focus so that like Parm and Dean find out about things in a way that's much more compacted and feels like it's keeping pace with the flashbacks, or I need Parm and Dean to have their own very real, very big stakes. So, like, if you had done something like where they are also both dealing with shitty father situations, but they're gonna figure out how to like get a happy ending regardless. Like, if they had personal stakes that like made people they had been more of like almost like more of a support. Like, if it became a thing of like you've done this before, but you can do it differently. Like, the story doesn't have to end this way in a way that was more emphasized. I think even that would have been such an improvement.
I agree with that. Yeah, because then you could almost go into like the thematics of like history doesn't have to repeat itself and still emphasize that things have changed and gotten better. Because even if say it was their fathers or say it was like their mothers, if you wanted a role reversal, you still could be like, okay, well now they have like a support system and they have resources now and they have a community now that is a little more out, a little stronger. Like,
Yeah.
and I think that would have thematically worked a lot better because what you're saying is true. Like, they need stakes of their own. That's not a mid-series rival that matters none at all.
I mean, like, hell, you could have just maintained the fathers. Like, one of them, I think Korn's dad is actually still alive. Like, you could have had that be a follow-through villain. This dad who was instrumental in his son killing himself did not feel bad about it. He felt angry about it, or like his son betrayed him, and now he's looking at this, like, grandson who's doing the same thing. Like, there's ways you could have, like, even made the conflicts that In and Korn are dealing with much more immediate to Parm and Dean. And I feel like they kind of tried to nudge at that with the family stuff. But even then, there's not stakes, right? It's just like immediately all of the family members are like, okay, whatever you do, don't kill yourselves. We love you. It's fine. But there's not like stakes there. And for me too, kind of thinking about it now as I'm talking about it, to have one story be so intimately shaped by incredible homophobia, right? Like to kind of be one of the worst expressions of what homophobia can do to people. And then for homophobia to just like be a total non-factor for them now, it feels like it's trying to do the thing BLs do sometimes where they're like, homophobia doesn't real and this is a world where being gay is okay, which is fine for like a different show. But for this show where homophobia has like killed people, has very literal physical death consequences, to not do anything with that in the present beyond like it gets better, it feels like a missed opportunity.
It makes the story weaker, especially because now as you're talking about it, I'm thinking about like you had said earlier, the family characters could have been emphasized more instead of all the university bullshit. It would have been so much more interesting and have more like interpersonal conflict if they were also conflicted about the deaths of Korn and In. There's no, everybody is so passively accepted.
Yeah.
Like, you know, they're just like, we're sad and we wish they were alive and now we're homophobia free. Which is like, you can have characters like Korn's brother is the character that kind of comes to mind immediately, where I imagine that after Korn has committed suicide, that it would have been more interesting if his brother had conflicted feelings about this, because that's a very, very difficult thing to have happen within your family. And it would have been more interesting if he was like conflicted because he's angry at his brother, you know, or just like still grieving, you know, or has like those complex feelings of grief, because grief is never just one note. And he's like, I had told him that he was accepted by me, but I wasn't enough apparently. You know, we could have found a way, we could have found answers. Like, if he just was somewhat conflicted about it, he doesn't have to be homophobic, because he wasn't in the past.
No, I love that he has that moment kind of sitting down next to him where he's like, yeah, I know you're dating him. And Korn's like, how'd you know? And he's like, you smiled like a human being. And that was very noteworthy given who you are as a person. So yeah, I kind of put two and two together that you were experiencing joy and it was always directed at that guy.
And it's like, it doesn't feel like there's any internal family conflict. You know, like for something of this magnitude to happen to a family, this would be carried on.
Right. And like, how do these families feel about the fact that they're interacting again? Like, I would have loved, even just set in the present, more stuff with In's sister, because that actress is phenomenal. The few scenes that she has, like when she's like talking to Dean, who's her grandson,
I don't know,
right?
someone needs to post a family tree of this shit.
Yeah, but she's talking to Dean, and she has like this really beautiful moment of like, he said, I'm dating a guy, and she's like, don't hurt yourself. Whatever happens, however bad it gets, don't hurt yourself. Come to me, and we will fix it. But it's acted beautifully, and I would have loved for like her and Parm to have more time to like talk to each other. I think, sort of thinking about it now, I would have loved more time for the family to like remember In and Korn, to bridge that gap for Parm and Dean, to really hear from the people who knew them what they were like, to be able to like not necessarily pass on like last messages. It's not really like Korn and are like talking to them just in closure. That way. Yeah, that closure. Because one of the scenes I do really love, and I think it's so telling that fucking Dean is not in it, it's like that last dream Parm has where he like wakes up and he's sitting inside the apartment and In and Korn are sitting on the couch, and I don't think they say anything. There's just like a moment of connection with him and In, and then Korn and In get up and like hold hands and they walk out of that apartment finally 30 years later. That moment was beautiful. And I think if they'd done more in that space, it would have resonated a lot more rather than being like, cool, well, we wrap that up. Anyways, they're going to break up for 10 minutes for some reason. And then there's still like,
Yeah.
I think, what, a final episode?
I'm pretty sure there's one after that. At that point, I felt like finishing the show was more an act of like obligation, even the first time I had watched it.
Oh, I was like rage finishing it, like just because I was not going to let it sit there unfinished
Yeah.
and like haunt me. I would not be mocked by this show in that way.
And it's funny too because like that scene that you mentioned of In and Harm it's one of the few moments in the show that feel well filmed too because the lighting is different.
It's like soft.
It's soft
yeah.
and
it feels like a dream. Like you know it's a dream from the moment you see it.
And it's also like it contrasts with the last time you had seen in that same room, which was dark and stormy.
Yeah. Well, because I don't think you've ever seen that apartment in like sunlight. I don't think there's a single moment of it in sunlight until that.
Yeah, exactly.
Dream.
Yeah, I will give them that one scene as like a moment of like, hey, I dug that filmmaking, that little bit of filmmaking. But yeah, you know, it's the show feels like it could have been so many different things that were better. Is I think what it comes down to.
Yep.
You know, like from a filmmaking perspective, from an acting perspective, from a story perspective, there were so many more avenues where the show could have improved, even in just incremental ways. Like throwing a sepia tone on the flashback so that as a viewer, I know when a flashback is happening and it's not jarring.
Anything.
It's because it's so jarring at points. Like there's just no indication. There is no delineation.
There are definitely ways to make something look like it's set in the 90s that aren't that intense, right? The fucking Fear Street stuff.
Oh, yes.
Like was very clearly set in the 90s without like having to really beat you over the head with it. There are ways to do this.
You had said that Shadow is set in the 90s, isn't it?
Shadow is set in the 90s. And I actually no, this is a great site. Thank you so much for this. So Shadow is like the new thing that Fluke is doing with a different partner. Ohm is not in it. It's set in high school, and reasonably Fluke does look like he could be in high school, and Ohm does not. He would have been like probably 17 inches taller than every other actor they cast to be a high school student at this Catholic high school. But like it's set in the 90s, and you can tell from like little things like, oh, people have Walkmans. And even if you're not like being drawn specifically to the Walkman, like the headphones are the very 90s headphones with like the one piece of like aluminum and the like squishy earbuds. It visually feels like the 90s, even though they're in the same situation of like everyone's wearing a uniform. So there's not necessarily a lot of costuming stuff you can do, but it's done so much more skillfully than in this show, which it's so colorless. Like honestly, now that I'm thinking about it, like Shadow has so many colors in it, so much richness, so much intensity. This feels like a show that has been animated, but the guy who was doing the colors got hit by a bus. So now we're just throwing it out there. Like, we done, like, the flat colors, but none of the shading. There's no shading yet. The only thing he totally finished was that last dream, because it was his favorite scene. Everything else is just like, well, that's what we got. Sorry, that was a very extended metaphor.
Luckily, I know a little bit about animation, and I have colleagues that work in animation, so I totally understood that reference. But you're right, though. Like, all these things add to why I find the show overhyped. Because this show, this was actually the first BL that I had watched, and we talked about this in our little introduction stuff. But it was the first BL that I had watched, and like, again, I dabbled in BL when I was a teenager and stuff. Like, I read Fake. I unfortunately read Gravitation. You know, we were on the fan sites back in the day. LiveJournal was a thing, kiddos. Kiddos, like I'm not only 30. But when I was starting to get, you know, when the boom was happening around the pandemic time and I was starting to get into BL again, this was the show that was on like every fucking rec list. And even now, I feel like when people ask like the big name fans in BL fandom, like, what do you recommend? This is still a show that comes up.
This one still comes up, which is wild to
all
me.
The time. And I feel kind of tricked.
It makes me feel very glad that I was pushed toward Bad Buddy first, because I don't know if I had sat through all of Until We Meet Again and been like, Kin Porsche is just different. Kin Porsche is built different. And then this is what everything else is. Now, I probably still would have kept watching because I prefer my content to be exclusively gay, and I will lower my standards a lot for like default gayness, but I would have been like less enthused about it. It would have been more grudging.
Yeah, and for me, like I have to just be real about it. Like these are the reasons we outlined in this episode why I think it's overhyped. Like for me, you could watch a supercut compilation of Corn and In's story, which is like 35 minutes on YouTube, and then watch Dean and Parms, which is like an hour.
And even the hour drags.
Even the hour drags,
Like,
honest to God.
Right. And if you are like into Win and Team, watch Between Us. It's shorter, and I think it's a little bit better because it's so funny though, because it's like the same timeline, so there is some of the like past lives bullshit, but they're doing that around Win and Team because Win and Team don't know about it. But it's less. And it's much more about like their own bullshit and like the very intense stakes they as people have in their own personal lives with their families and their trauma. So I think Between Us is a better watch if you're gonna watch one of
I'm
them.
gonna second that, even though I haven't watched it, because I trust my co-host's opinion dearly and deeply. So, but yeah, for me, like those are the reasons really why, like, I personally find Until We Meet Again just overhyped. Like to me, if I was going to rec shows to somebody, like if somebody came to me and asked me like, what BLs would you recommend, this would not be on the list, because if you're within like my general millennial age bracket, you've already seen this story anyway, and you've seen it shorter. You've seen it in many movies. You've seen it in many Degrassi episodes. You know, like it's nothing.
Yeah.
The only thing new is the reincarnation stuff, which like I don't think is super well done, and the filmmaking isn't there.
It's not.
And you know, yeah, just watch the compilations on YouTube. Like they're easier, and they will be linked down below.
Yeah, like if you really want like tragic endings and for anything gay, like fucking go watch Brokeback Mountain. Brokeback Mountain is doing a lot of very similar themes as In and Corn, but much, much better. If you want reincarnation in a BL, go watch The Sign. It's a lot more fun. It's cops, which is not great, but like it's a lot more fun. It's a lot funnier.
It's filmed way better.
Sexier. Yeah, I honestly, the first scene ever in The Sign with that whole like fake mission in the building thing is beautiful. Like it's just a gorgeous action opener. Like if you had told me this was like fucking Mission Impossible, I would have been like, okay, yeah, sure.
Yeah, like the long shots are done really well, and it's like the first BL that I've seen do a long shot, which was so exciting for me. Like, yeah, I love that it started in media res. Like I love that it started in the middle of things.
Yeah.
You know, and how it gives you subtle bits of context and stuff until it essentially like does the midpoint plot twist and such. And it's just, to me, The Sign is reincarnation done well. There's also director that buys me dinner, who buys me dinner, is a Korean BL. It's not as good as The Sign in my opinion by any stretch, but it's also does reincarnation better than Until We Meet Again, if only because it's fucking shorter. Yeah. It's like 8 20-minute episodes. There's probably a movie cut of it already, and it's just so much easier to get through and still get that like reincarnation fix.
Right. And if you still want something that feels very soulmatey, I would again recommend I Feel You Linger in the Air. I think it kind of has that like soft like life being radically changed just by meeting someone kind of feel. If you want something historic, this is kind of like an out there recommendation, but like Nobleman Ryu's Wedding, I think is actually a lot of fun in terms of like totally unexpected relationship. Oh, and it's just a very sweet show overall, and also like more funny and much shorter. University shit, there's 500,000 things that are set in university. There's so many. And I know there are sports BLs out there, but I don't think I've watched any of them, so I can't recommend you anything for sports other than Between Us. And that's all I got. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, Hayaku, but like that's technically not gay, even though it's like super gay.
What's the ice skating one?
Oh, Yuri on Ice. Yes.
Yeah, Yuri on Ice. There you go. Watch Yuri on Ice. I know the tennis one that came out recently. People who I love very dearly but are much less picky than I were not thrilled with how that one shook out. So I don't.
Oh yeah.
It was also the twins one of the rash of like twins. What if we just swapped spots?
Yeah, I
think it might have been called Twins. Yeah,
it's twins meets volleyball, which just felt like Hayaku fanfiction to me.
Right, like no, the twins of my heart are obviously not in Nant because they're insane. But you know, some people like knee pads, and Twins is there for you.
I've heard
I
mixed
guess.
things about that show. I can't speak to the quality of that show. I have not watched.
Yeah,
Twins.
I've not watched that one.
I would recommend everybody do their research on these shows to see if you vibe at all. Like whenever we make recommendations or we talk about things we do or don't like, we are not trying to be authorities. Like I have no interest in being an authority. These are just like my opinions as someone that likes film, studies film, writes about film, you know, in the day-to-day and such, with an amazing co-host, and we get to be snarky and funny about it.
Yeah, it's great. And like, if fucking Until We Meet Again is your favorite fucking BL, it's totally fine. Live your
Yeah, that's
bliss.
Gucci.
That's fantastic. I'm glad that your favorite BL is so long then. Like, genuinely, like, I'm glad you're spoiled. And it's 17 hours long.
So long. Like, I will watch the extended versions of Lord of the Rings, which are not that good.
Hell, if you really want like coming back to life, fucking watch The Untamed. Read Grandmasters of Demonic Cultivation,
Yes,
actually.
please.
But if you don't read, which is fine, watch The Untamed.
There you go, right there. And if you want something that's set in the 80s that deals also with a lot of thematics from Thailand, Your Name Engraved therein, that's a great movie.
Yeah, a lot of, what is his name? Is it Ankar Y?
I think so.
Yeah, Ankar Y, I believe is his name. If I'm wrong, we'll correct it in the notes. Has directed several absolutely beautiful movies about queer men that are fantastic and kind of dealing more with like the heavier side of living within society that's not like through a BL rose tinted lens.
And even though Until We Meet Again might have not been like our thing, we still have fan works linked.
Probably my favorite fan work of all time is, funnily enough, for this BL.
It's really ironic.
It's
like,
so good.
I've been reading fanfics since I was like 10 years old on fanfiction.net, reading like fucking Inuyasha fanfiction, okay? I've read a lot of garbage and a lot of good shit. And this fanfic, ever C words echoes more.
Yeah, I've never cried reading fic before, but like I was ugly crying when I finished this, to the point that like my wife came downstairs and she was like, "Are you okay?" And I was like, "Yeah, it's just like sometimes you eventually get what you want." It's like it was like a whole thing.
Yeah, it's a corded in fanfic, and it's just phenomenal. The prose, it's one of the few fanfics where I would actually use the word prose, like not voice.
Like, not to like fucking conspiracy theory on Maine, but I fully believe this person has to be a published author. Like, there's no way that they're not. Not important, really. But like, there's really not a lot of fic, and I mean, fic is not trying to be published work most of the time, but there's very little fic that like feels like sitting down and reading a novel, and a very good novel.
And this definitely, I think this was the fic that I had sent you when we were just chatting, right? Like when we had just
Yeah,
first
because I remember you sent it, like you were very much like, it's really long, and I was like, oh no. Like, good long fic? Damn.
Yeah, because it's probably novella length.
It's like, it's hefty. Yeah.
But
to me,
it's worth it. Yeah, so that's linked, and some other like minor fan works are also linked, because again, we are always all about shouting out folks in fandom, making fan works, y'all carrying the fandom on your back, just like Flute carried the present storyline on his.
Okay, so final verdict for Until We Meet Again. Overall, overhyped. If it sounds interesting to you, watch all of In and Korn's scenes on YouTube in a compilation that will be set to like violin versions of K-pop songs.
You're not wrong.
They're all like, it's so funny because like I was watching one of them in preparation for this, and it was just like Beauty and the Beast, My Heart Will Go On. I don't know that one, and someone's in the comments being like, it's a tease, and I'm like, I don't know who that is. Okay, like that's what they're all set to, is like piano and violin covers of songs. If you really like Win and Team, watch Between Us. And yeah, and any of the ones that we mentioned are, I would call them more enjoyable watches if this sounds like interesting to you. So yeah, any of those ones we mentioned, I will stand by as a better time if you're gonna watch something.
And you know what? Like, drop us a comment if you want us to talk about another quote-unquote classic or super popular BL that either you think is overhyped, or you want to see if we think it's under or overhyped, because this is a series, not everyone is going to be overhyped.
No, some of them will be appropriately hyped.
Yes, exactly. Some of them might even be underhyped and underappreciated personally.
Even for this one, I don't regret watching it, if only for watching like Kuhart be as good as Kuhart is in this show. Like, I would not watch it again, but I don't regret watching it just because I had no idea Kuhart. I like primarily knew Kuhart as someone who's very cunty on Instagram that my wife followed and like made like very needy noises at. So then to find out like, oh, Kuhart's actually a fantastic actor was like such a bonus blessing of Kuhart.
Yes. One day Kuhart will star in a show that I have interest in again.
Kuhart is just so willing to show off so much thigh.
Yes.
Kuhart and PP Crit, let them be in something where they can wear like the cutout cunty skirt clothes of their dreams, and then they can kiss. It would be great. I would watch.
It would be so great.
I would watch 17 episodes of that show.
All right, so that's it for this episode, everybody. We will see you next time.
Bye.